The African American Legend series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as politics, sports, aviation, business, literature, and religion. We will explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they've been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is William C. Thompson, better known as Bill Thompson, the comptroller of the city of New York. Hi, Bill.
Dr. Brown, how are you?
Okay, a lot of people don't even know how to spell controller. They think it's controller. But tell us about the comptroller, why it's called the comptroller, and what does the comptroller do?
Well, the comptroller is opposed to controller, and if you look different places, the Daily News will not write it as comptroller. It's controller as far as they're concerned. It is more a reflection of government in comptroller as opposed to the business world and the corporate world in controller. What do I do? It's 5 or 6 different things that really look at the health and the financial health of New York City. You know, first, I'm very proud to head an office of about 730 people in the controller's office. And we do, as I said, about 5 or 6 different things. First, while the council and the mayor may do the budget, we have oversight of how New York City spends its money and the authority to audit, and not just financially, but on a performance basis, to see how we spend our money, make recommendations on how we can do things better, how we can stay on the cutting edge of government. Secondly, when it comes to prevailing wage, the rate that working men and women get paid on public construction jobs, I set and enforce prevailing wage and have the authority to bring fines and penalties against contractors.
Now that's interesting. You say you set. Does that mean Bill Thompson sets, or your office sets, or do you have any review board that sets? Do you negotiate with the unions? How does that work?
We have staff in our Office of Labor Law who they will do once every year, and as a matter of fact, almost an update of what people are paid in certain areas. And we'll kind of do an average of that, take a look at it, and that becomes the prevailing wage. So that posted wage is what employers have to pay.
They do. Well, what's the penalty if they don't pay it?
Well, you have to pay. I mean, it would be whatever the workers were shorted. It is also possible fines and penalties that we'd kind of determine. And in worst cases, if we have repeat offenders, I can debar contractors from doing business with the city for a 5-year period of time. When it also comes to trips and falls, settlements against the city of New York, everybody sues New York. Somebody gets hurt in a hospital. There's an accident on a city transportation. Somebody slips and falls on a sidewalk. They sue the city of New York. I have to approve all settlements against the city of New York. Total settlements last year, about $500 million, $500 million.
Now, do you have a legal department that defends the city, or is that through the
Corporation Council?
Corporation Council.
It's kind of a mix. The Corporation Council will defend the city of New York, but the authority to do settlements that the Corporation Council has will approve those settlements. The large settlements will do. We create a range that the Corporation Council's people can approve settlements. But also, it's the same thing. I have legal people in my office also, in our office of claims and settlements. They'll do settlements also and try and move things along.
So if I trip and fall outside this building and hurt my toe, do I sue Bill Thompson? Do I sue Mike Bloomberg?
Well, I think you have a better chance of getting paid if you sue Mike Bloomberg. No, I think you wind up suing the city of New York. And in doing so...
And then what happens?
Well, you'll file a notice of claim with the comptroller's office. We may be able to settle that there. There's a period of time that you have to file that claim. And then if things can't be resolved there, no, you move forward with a full-blown lawsuit. But there is that possibility that, we try and settle claims. If there's merit to a claim, we'll try and settle it and get it done early.
That's interesting. So your office actually has the authority to settle small claims, let's say.
Absolutely. As I said, and we're kind of, as I said, I'm like at a certain point the insurance agent for the city of New York. And then in a few other areas, when it comes to registration of contracts, we register all contracts in the city of New York that they come to our office. Limited authority to be able to reject those, and probably the biggest public attempt that I had to reject it that did get overturned in court was the Snapple contract with the city of New York, and I just felt that things were not done in a public and open process.
Now, in reviewing contracts, do you review the criminal background and the business background of the organizations that are trying to do business with the city?
In some ways, that's called Vendex, and people have to, that has to be filed. We've tried to make it a little easier so it can be done online, and but people will check, and if a bad Vendex can prevent somebody from doing business with the city of New York, definitely.
But suppose a contractor doesn't hire enough minorities. Is that a basis for rejecting a contract?
It doesn't go into the Vendex, but I think that what you've seen is an attempt, particularly in the construction world, in the last few years. A lot of it led and created initially by Congressman Rangel. You know, Mayor Bloomberg put together what was called the Rangel Commission, and we had all worked together with the trade unions, with contractors, with others, to bring more African Americans, Latinos, and women into the construction and the unionized construction world. And that's growing, that's improving.
Yeah, how important is it for an African American to hold a position like this? Carl McCall was, of course, control of the state, but there have been very few, if not any, before you who were
nobody before me.
Aside from the symbolism, how is it important that someone from the African American community who knows the trials and travails and the intricacies of our community to be controlled? How important is that?
I think it's important. I mean, I think if you look at New York City, the two last areas, by the way, just throw two last things out in what do I do, and New York City bonds. It's something that the mayor and I have to agree on, everything from the Wall Street firms that wind up, you know, helping to issue and underwrite those bonds. We do probably $5 to $8 billion or $5 to $9 billion a year in debt issuance. So I have to approve that along with the mayor. And then finally, New York City's pension funds. I sit as a trustee of 4 of the 5 boards, chief investment officer for all 5 pension funds, total assets about $111 billion. Where my experience and background and watching companies over a period of time, African American, Latino firms, women-owned firms, try and do business with New York City and perhaps not have had the opportunity or have been shut out. I think we have, you know, put some things together on the pension side as well as on the bond side that right now New York City is probably, you know, is probably one of the best as far as providing what I like to term access and opportunity to firms, to minority firms around the country. And I think, you know, the background, my background, who I am, what I am, and the experiences that I've gone through have led me, you know, as I came into city government, or at least as I came into the comptroller's office, that became one of my priorities. And the trustees on my 5 pension boards have worked together in harmony with me to get those things done.
It's very interesting. You anticipated something I was going to ask. In New York State, the comptroller is the sole representative of the pension fund. In New York City, you have a pension board.
5 different boards, teachers, New York City Employees Retirement System, the police, fire, and the Board of Education Retirement System. We had 5, and if you look at even the 4 largest ones, I point out the Board of Education System is probably the smallest at about $2.5 billion. If you look at the other 4, we have more than 30 trustees on those boards with varying degrees and varying percentages of votes. So no, state comptroller is sole trustee, and as I always like to say, can make a decision by, you know, looking in the mirror. The city comptroller's job is a different job in a lot of ways. It is more of, in the financial side, in that area, on the pension side, it's more of a leadership position that, you know, in sitting and having my office, you know, and the chief investment officer for the pension funds, you know, I hire. But it is, you have to lead and work collaboratively with the other trustees. And I'm fortunate that we have a good group of trustees who look forward, who take their responsibility seriously, and have been involved in change and moving, you know, our pension funds forward.
Well, you said that some of the trustees have proportional voting.
Sure.
How does that work?
Well, if you look at the Employees Retirement System board, the NYC's board, as a quick example, there's 7 total votes on the board. The mayor, the public advocate, and the comptroller each have a full vote. The 3 largest unions on that side have a vote. Transport Workers Union, DC 37, and the Teamsters, Local 237. But when you look at it, the borough presidents, 5 borough presidents have a full vote between them. They each have a 1/5 of a vote. And it is very interesting, you know, as I said, you can wind up having a, you know, a 3 3/5 as opposed to a 3 2/5 vote on that board. It is very, very interesting.
Does it actually happen sometime that there's a 3-3 or 3.5 on whether you spend your money here or invest it here?
We haven't had a vote like that, but at the same point, the one thing about the trustees, no matter what percentage of vote they have, whether it's a full vote or a percentage of a vote, their trustees are very focused. They have very definite opinions, and the trustees, some who have, some financial background, some who don't, all are pay, a lot of attention and create a lot of focus and a lot of study. So as I said, I think, New York City, the members, whether they're retired or whether they're active members of city government right now who are working there, their money's safe. The trustees on our boards do an excellent job.
Did the city have any Enron stock?
Yeah, we did.
How did that happen?
We're indexed at a certain point on a large cap side. We have, stock in almost every company across the board. As a matter of fact, in some ways we're indexed and others we're part of different things. We probably hold, 2,000 or 3,000 different stocks. If you look at us, because we hold those stocks, one of the things it has allowed us, though, is to be probably the most aggressive public pension fund in the country when it comes to shareholder rights. So we're very aggressive, very focused. But yeah, we had Enron stock, we had some WorldCom stock, we had other things. We were part of some of the larger class action suits, and we have been fortunate in recovering a good portion of some of the things that we believe that we had lost.
Now, what about Darfur? Do we invest in companies that do business with Sudan and Darfur and so on?
We do. As a matter of fact, we have stock in a number of companies that, or not a number, but in some companies that have operations in Sudan, that have operations, and mostly these are foreign companies now, that have, operations or doing business in Iran, and we've pushed those companies directly. If you look at those companies in Sudan, we've said to them that they need to be involved in humanitarian aid. And we have written, the CEOs of all those companies, asked them to describe to us what they're doing, what they're involved, how they're helping to improve the situation in the company, what they've been doing as far as, there were peace discussions, what were they doing to help to bolster that. And the same thing in looking at Iran, where you have the possibility of, trying to pressure that country. Because they're trying to obtain nuclear capacity in different ways. We've pushed a number of those companies to say, wait a minute, we don't know if it's a good idea for you to be in Iran, for you to do business there. And even going back, last but not least, if you look at some of the companies that we had pushed, American companies, back in 2002, 2003, 2004, like GE, ConocoPhillips, Halliburton and others, they were doing business in nations that support terrorism, in nations like Iran and Syria and others, and we pushed them successfully and got them out of those countries. So it is interesting what you can do with the power of kind of a vote and holding stock in a number of different companies.
Well, the threat is that you would sell their stock and they would not have their investment if they don't do something, like, for example, in Darfur.
That's one of the threats that you can use, but possibly also, and it works better with American-based companies and U.S. companies, but a big part of it also is, it's not that you'll go away, it's that you won't go away. And you'll try and build support with other shareholders. And I think that's the one thing that we were very successful in American-based companies, and looking at them and saying, we think you need to get out of these countries that support terrorism because you're helping to aid terrorism in different ways, and started to build support across the country and around the world to start to bring, shareholder resolutions, and those numbers and the number of shareholders who would take a look and say, wait a minute, this isn't what we want with our money. And begin to pressure them to stop doing business like that.
Well, let's talk about 2008, fiscal 2009. I've been hearing with releases from your office and the press that we are facing a $6 to $8 billion deficit in 2011, 2012, and that property values are going down, so our tax revenues are going down. What's going on with the city of New York?
Okay.
What is Mr. Controller going to do about it?
Well, I think that right now, if you look, we've run into, as the rest of the country has, a bit of an economic slowdown. We're probably doing better than other places in the country because of a few things. And if you look what helped to lead us to record surpluses in the last few years, real estate was humming, and commercial real estate particularly was going up. A lot of transactions on a residential and commercial level, all of that, it was helped. New York City gets money because of that. Tourism at a record level, and that was up also, and Wall Street was doing well. Those three things really put us in a good place. And now, Wall Street, because of the subprime crisis and the crisis in credit, they're having problems, and there's been a slowdown there. A third of our revenue comes from Wall Street, or Wall Street, directly or indirectly. So we're seeing a slowdown there. Real estate, all of a sudden things have flattened a bit. You're not seeing, while things are holding value by and large, you're seeing a little bit of a slowdown, a little bit of a decline there. That's another area then that has impact on the budget. Thank goodness tourism, and there's good and bad there. Tourism is still up and moving along well. A lot of it's still being fueled by a weak dollar.
Weak dollar, that's right.
And because of that, it's good for tourism, good for exports, not good as far as strengthening the dollar. All of those things, what it's done to New York City, we had, as I said, last year when we closed the books, it's June 30th, and the year before that, we've had record surpluses, close to in excess of $5 billion. Okay, now we've gone from what we looked at in the next fiscal year that starts July 1st. We looked at about $1.5 billion gap. It's grown a little. So now we're looking at about $2.7 billion gap. Not insurmountable. I think that, the mayor has taken note of that. He's asked all city agencies to tighten their budgets, tighten their belts a little bit. A 2.5% decrease starting January 1st of this year, and a possible 5% starting July 1st. So the steps are being taken to be able to tighten things up a little bit. I don't know, people are talking about, are there going to be tax increases? I don't know about that. I think that right now, tightening our belts, you may see, we're not sure what will happen to the $400 rebate that we've seen, for property owners in the last few years. That is always a year-to-year decision based on the city's fiscal health. We'll have to see how things are moving along there. So I wouldn't, I'm not going to paint a picture of doom and gloom. We've been there before. If you look at 2002, 2003.
1976, we were in bankruptcy.
Almost went bankrupt then. 2002, 2003, we had record deficits in New York City. The after effects of recession in September 11th. So we've been in tough places before. I think right now we're looking at budget gaps that are projected to grow. As you point out, in 2011 fiscal year, the possibility of a $6 billion budget gap, or $6.5 billion, we're still a ways away from that.
Well, but again, when you deal with the financial situation, you're dealing with both the business aspect and the quality of life. We have more teachers, we have more police officers, we have more people in health, because we have had good budgets. Now, we were around, you were around, when the police department went from 33,000 down to 24,000. Now it's back up to 35,000, and clearly the crime rate is related to that. It's gone down. As a controller, or as a prospective mayoral aspirant, what would you say to the people of New York about our future, financially and socially?
I would still say that New York City's future is probably brighter than ever. If you look at our...
And I'll say why.
And I'm going to... If you look at neighborhood upon neighborhood upon neighborhood in this city, they're growing. There are people who are still coming here from all over the world and helping to add to the vitality of New York City. We are stronger than ever before. We're in the midst of a record construction boom in New York City. That right now there are neighborhoods that people used to talk about as almost national disasters. No more. There are no disaster areas in New York City. And resident upon resident upon resident is staying and helping to make the city stronger. So I would say to people, look at our economy. It may be dependent on Wall Street in a lot of ways. It is becoming a bit more diverse as you look at small entrepreneurs across the city of New York, as you look at independent workers across New York City. It's a city that continues to grow. So I would say to everybody, and I think we, as I said, we've seen the darkest days in New York. Our best days are ahead of us still.
Now again, when you do an analysis, you do the prospective and the retrospective. What could happen to the city and the city's economy that would cause this rosy picture to turn into a gloomy picture?
Well, as I said, it would take, I mean, anything is always possible. The nation slides into recession. Is New York City going to go along with it? I mean, right now we have done better in the last couple of years. We've done better than the rest of the nation. I think something like that might do damage to New York City. But right now, as I said, we are amazingly stable. We may have some ups and downs, but I think we've also been smart in putting some money away and doing things like prepaying some bills that are bringing down budget gaps. So I'm confident that, in the near future, and even in the next 2-3 years, we're going to be able to overcome the challenges. The one thing we have to be careful about, and I think the one thing that we saw in the last financial downturn, the last one where we saw major budget gaps, there's always a cry in some people, it's a great opportunity to cut budgets dramatically and reduce the budget and lay people off. And well, everything has to be done in balance. And I think that's the lesson that we've learned in the last few years, the lesson that you learned in the 70s when you laid off tens of thousands of people and the city declined. Don't do things that will destroy or do damage to quality of life. Make sure that things, as you point out, like crime and others, don't rise. And I think that's a prescription for making sure that New York City stays strong also.
But the income gap in New York City is the largest of any place in the world in terms of the haves and the have-nots, fueled largely by Wall Street. There are a lot of undereducated people who don't have adequate skills to compete in the labor market. You were president of the New York City Board of Education, where you got a lot of this wisdom that you're now showing.
Is that what I'm showing?
But the question is, what is going to be the role of education in developing the labor force, these millions of new people? New York City was losing population back in the late 80s or early 90s, and now it's gained 1 million people. Many of them are new people. Some of them are skilled, but many of them with modest skills.
Right.
What was the role of education, and how would you, as a mayor or as a leader, help to revive this dream that we had that education will make people available for the workforce?
Well, I think that, the things that we understand, and it is some of it that I learned when I was at the Board of Education as its chair, some of it over the years. I think that a lot of this is making sure that first, our young people are skilled and versed in fundamentals. And I think that's important, the ability, to read on grade level in early grades, the ability to do math that you'll be able to use, the ability to use a computer, and to be able to understand what goes into that. That's important in making sure that people and our young people have the skills that they need to be able to compete in the global economy. But in addition to that, and ultimately starting to work and say to our young people, you can go to college, you should go to college. But it is also understanding at a certain point, I put a report out in December, or really October, that looked at career and technical education, that said, something? Everybody may not have to go to college. There are jobs in construction where you're going to wind up making, where you're going to start.
Particularly if your relative works in construction.
Well, they even see that's changing also. We have schools now, or school at the very least, dedicated to turning out students to go straight into the construction trades. If you look at the apprentice programs that are all part of this, that's growing in the number of African Americans, Latinos, and women, it's an impressive growth. But I think that what we have to do is to take a look. Those are jobs that are going to exist now, are going to exist. People are aging out of those jobs. That's a great career track. You will have employment. You will it will provide a middle class, living for years to come. But it's things like that. Auto mechanics. Every place that you go to get your car repaired, you will see a sign asking for an auto mechanic. They're some of the best ones making over $100,000 a year.
Bill, you said that not everybody needs to go to college.
So not everybody at a certain point to be able to be successful. And just one last thing on that. Now, in career and technical education, those who graduate from those schools, who graduate with skills, go to college in a greater percentage, perhaps because they have something to fall back on.
Well, I would say, particularly as a former community college president, a community college education should be the goal for every student.
And I would probably
just like in 1900, the goal for every student was to get a high school education. So I think in some way we send mixed messages when we say not everybody needs to go to college.
But the one thing
skills that you get in college help you to do any kind of job, auto mechanic, construction, etc.
True, but I think the one thing that you don't want to do is to say to a young person, if you don't go to college, if you don't go to a 2-year college, and the one thing about some of the, and you know better than anybody, a lot of our 2-year colleges provide training and technical skills also. And that's, I've been a huge fan of that. I was over at City Tech, a few weeks ago. They're doing a great job at providing basic skills in a number of different places dentistry, culinary arts, a number of different things. Those are jobs that people are going to get. They're going to help them move up. So I don't disagree with you there. At the same point, what I don't think, what we don't want to do is to say to a young person who may be in the 10th grade that right now isn't going to go to college right away, or that's not in their plans in the future. If you don't, you're a failure. I think that what we can do is to say, wait a minute, there are options for you, and I think that's the thing that we want to do. You can move forward and go into a 2-year institution, into a community college, but at the same point, you may be able to be trained to come out and make $20, $22, $23, $24 an hour. Wait a minute. That's a good, that's a good foundation.
$4.95 working at McDonald's.
And that's what you don't want to do.
That's what you don't want. Now, let me turn toward the close of the program. Bill Thompson is a great public servant, done a lot of great stuff, and knows his business. It's rumored that you might be interested in running for mayor. Is that true?
I think while I'm not going to do an official declaration, I think that I think that's a good bet. Now, I think that, I think people should expect to see me run in 2009.
Why should the great people of this great city of New York support Bill Thompson for mayor?
Well, I think, no matter who runs, I will bring a background and experience as a native New Yorker, as one who went to our public schools, as somebody who understands New York and the people of New York City, who's been involved and helped to lead the education system forward, who's helped to do development in Brooklyn as, the youngest deputy borough president in Brooklyn's history, who as comptroller has helped to move this city forward through tough times and good times, and would bring probably the best background and experience to the job of mayor as anybody who's talking about running these days. I think that's one of the reasons that New Yorkers would look at my candidacy, and look at a Bill Thompson candidacy and say, something, he'd make a good mayor.
That would make a great commercial. that was really very good.
Thank you.
Again, Bill, you have shown an interest in the city. You've shown the skill that makes the city work. The city does face some serious problems ahead, challenges. How will you help us to make those challenges?
Well, I think it is in the way that I've dealt with things over the years. The things that, and I will give Mike Bloomberg credit as mayor, analyzing, looking at challenges, looking at problems, not just the ones that are in front of us, but the ones that are 5 and 10 years down the road, and start to put plans forward to deal with those things, acknowledging the problems and then dealing with them and working together to move forward. I think that's, we're talking about congestion these days and traffic congestion. We're looking at the education system. You're looking at so many different things and the challenges that face New York, not just in the next year or 2 years, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. How do we deal with that? It is acknowledging it and then putting the plans forward to deal with it.
And I believe Bill Thompson can meet those challenges. Today on African American Legends, we've been talking with William Bill Thompson, the comptroller of the city of New York. Thanks for being with us for a great interview.
Always an honor, Dr. Brown.
Today, the nation recognizes the memory of the great civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. CUNY TV and African American Legends proudly acknowledges the contributions of this great American.